retail media and digital out-of-home. This was the big news last week. I mean, we all heard about Tesco, that they're investing heavily, but now they announced that they're building a network, 6,000 large format displays just in the UK within 20 months. So it grew from 400 to 6,000 in 20 months. And all of you know how expensive a 75-inch screen is and what it means. There are some smaller screens too, to be honest, but this is really, really massive. So for them, it's a game changer, not only for them, but for all supermarkets. And why are supermarkets so investing so heavily into digital out-of-home and retail media? Well, the thing is, they have frequency, they have footfall, that matters, and they have data. They know exactly who's coming. And the data thing is really important for Tesco because Tesco has a huge loyalty card program. They have more than 20 million people who come every day. They or not every day, but a few times a week. They identify themselves. They have fantastic data. And the great thing about retail media is attribution. You show an ad, and at least in the evening, you can really check, did a person buy exactly the product which was advertised. So this is really, really game changer. They also have now handheld scanners. I'm not a big fan of them, but in some markets they work quite well. Yes, they have a small display, and you can also put advertising on there. So the question is how much advertising consumers and shoppers really accept. But we are still in a learning phase, so it's open to that one. But most interesting, experts expect that they could generate up to 10% of the net profit. The net profit last year was 2.8 billion through retail media.
And it's profit.
It's profit, not
important.
Revenue. Exactly.
Not revenue.
Stefan.
So a little disagreement with what you just discussed with Frank. We see, although in-store media looks very similar to digital out-of-home, it actually isn't the same thing. They might be part of the same overall market, but there are distinct differences between how digital out-of-home business model works and the retail media business works. And you can think of it, it's probably a bit simplified, but the relation you can think of in-store media networks work versus digital out-of-home behaves a little bit like search advertising online to banner advertising online. So it's very close to the transaction. So it's more sales messages typically, a bit less marketing messages in-store media, and it's more branding, more marketing messages in digital out-of-home and banner advertising. So it's a very, very hot topic, but it's actually not new. It's in retail marketing. Supermarkets have sold advertising to their to the brands like forever, and for a very, very long time. It's been printed advertising mostly, cardboard things. So it's been there in the pre-digital age already. So this, in principle, it's nothing new. And then with the digitalization, you had three waves basically. You had the first wave, which is search marketing. So Google is huge in that. Then the next wave was social marketing, which is mainly driven by Meta. And the third wave now is retail media, mainly dominated by Amazon. And if you look at time frames, how long it took those new business models to get to a size of $50 billion, it was about 14 years for search, 11 or 12 years for social, but only 5 years for retail media. So time frames are shrinking. And you talked about, we give you some numbers, the business is huge.
Exactly. And I mean, there's this 100 billion number, we have 130 billion, we have a 200 billion. It's big, period. And it's hardly debatable, how big it is, but it's way, way bigger than most people think. And has an average sales lift of a typical campaign of 20 to 30%. So that's massive. So it really works. And that's also what Frank said, what all the retailers really are confirming. Retail media works. Paper for many decades, and now obviously digital especially. And then you have 15 to 30% improved customer engagement, which obviously this is the ultimate goal.
And it's growing quite fast, 8%. There again, you can believe these numbers, so don't take them by the last digit. But growth around 8-10%, and that's scale.
On a global scale, yep.
On a global scale.
Exactly, exactly. So, but when we talk about retail media, we have to separate between retail media and retail media networks. Retail media networks are the in-store, in-store screens, which we typically, talk about at this conference. But as you can see, the largest, there's 2023 numbers, so these are really current. So Amazon generated 35 billion, and an additional 5 billion, which are usually not accounted for, but roughly 40 billion US dollars with retail media. That's a lot of money. And that's the reason why everyone is so keen on this one. The number two is Walmart, which is 10% of that. So that's accurate. They're growing faster than the other guys, but still it's massive. It's massive. And to be honest, Stefan, without that, Amazon would be in deep shit. Huh?
Yeah, this is really interesting. The lower curve shows the profit of the Amazon retail business. And you see it's negative across the board past couple of years. And the reason why they're making money in this business is because of the advertising part of the business. So for Amazon, actually selling product, they're not earning money on that. And if you also look at what typical Amazon search results page looks like, this is what you typically see in your browser. It's like only ad space. It's all paid for. That's how they're earning money. And if you look at the full page, so really scroll down all the way about 1/3 down the page or half down the page, you see first real results, so not paid for. And you see, if you look at the red shaded parts, that's how they make them advertising money.
That's the 40 billion. And yes, so more and more retailers are jumping on the bandwagon. So we basically today in 2024, all the larger grocery chains are looking at. But it's not only grocery chains, but it's also health and beauty, especially drugstores and everything, and DIY. The main reason, these are the three vertical markets with the highest footfall, so there it really makes sense, and they have the data, they're more sophisticated, and they know they have lots of customer data.
And in general, it's multi-brand and high footfall retail. That's basically the entry hurdle for if you're a retailer.
Yeah, it needs to be multi-brand, otherwise it's different.
But it's also moving to commerce media, so it's not only traditional retail, but you see also hotels and hospitality. And things like that, fitness studios.
It's an academic discussion, but we know most people call it retail media because it's in retail. But yes, as gyms and other hotels are also including it. They have this new term which is commerce media. But let's stick with most people use. We also use digital signage for the past 20 years, which is by far not the ideal term. So I would just stick with it. But yes, there's commerce media. It's more common in North America than over here in Europe.
And if you look at the companies who are doing it, in Walmart, Carrefour, Walgreens, Tesco, they all built their own dedicated units. And they're not only about retail media, but they are also about data. It's always the combination of the data unit and the retail media unit, because data plays such a huge role in selling these advertising slots, selling the media. And that's why they put it together in separate units.
Stefan, that's a very, very interesting chart.
Yeah. So we just told you that the bulk of the revenue comes from actually online or digital media. But if you look at audiences, I was really surprised when I saw this first time. The in-store audiences for most of these retailers are between 1.5 and 2.5 times larger than their online reach. So the real audience reach for these retailers typically in-store.
That's why there's so much upside potential.
Yeah.
And when you look at typical spend today of CPGs, that's consumer product, packaged goods, they currently only spend 24% of their money in-store on screens, more or less, and the rest is digital, either on-site, which is within a brand website, off-site, which is third-party advertisement on websites, and directly, which also includes a little digital, but that's mailings and other things. But currently, only roughly every fourth US dollar or euro is spent in store. And when you remember, the frequency, the potential, so there's so much potential there. That's the reason why everyone, sees retail media really as the next big thing.
And 90% of the purchases are made
in store.
Yep. So So if you look at it from the perspective of a consumer packaged goods company, and it's pretty obvious why they like it and why they want to do it. They get access to relevant audiences, and the important thing. Potentially higher return on advertising spend. It's probably also a bit like it's more attributable, so it's a bit easier to measure. Improved attribution and measurement is a big point. The ability to drive that actually across all their their marketing channels. So the full funnel objectives, and they get, or they hope to get, rich data and insights, because that's typically something the retailers want to keep for themselves, and they are very cautious about sharing that with brands. They will share the important data, but obviously they won't open up all their big data sources and data knowledge.
Stefan, what's so fascinating is this chart, and we just want to visualize it, This is about, how they can make money. To make €1, in their pocket, profit, they need to sell 20 to 60 loaves of bread. Just to give you an idea what it means, why it's so attractive to put up a screen. The margin is so much higher. Typical margin in food retail, it's a very low percentage, while a single percentage. And so that's why it's so crazy. That's why Tesco believes, or experts believe that Tesco can make 10% of their profit just with, with a few thousand screens. Yeah. It's a lot, but it's nothing compared to the 100, 200 billion revenue they have annually.
Yeah. You really have to sell a lot of bread for a bread ad.
Absolutely.
So we were throwing around a lot of terms here. There's so many different things. There's retail media networks, commerce media, retail media, in-store, off-site, on-site, all these different terms. And we were trying to also classify it a little bit for you and help you to navigate through the space, because there's just so many terms that are unclear.
But as we're in digital signage, we start with some visuals. All of you are aware of it, but this is a typical ICA setup in Sweden. So these are typical screens right next to the point of sale. It's clear messaging, and it's really about sales storytelling at the point of sale and creating upselling. This is a typical network in 7-Eleven convenience store in Thailand. What's so interesting here that this is operated by out-of-home company. Probably 7-Eleven wouldn't do it today like this again, but they have this contract for a few years. And as the stores are very, very small, you see the stretch displays all over the place on top of the coolers and everything. So it's full of screens, and they use twice 16:9, so it's showing regular ads and promoting some of the products which are available in store. Typical thing. Stefan, retail media, what's all about?
Trying to provide some clarity here. So the big overall term, retail media, it splits into digital and non-digital part. Obviously, we're only looking here at the digital retail media part. And there again, it splits into online and mobile part and the physical part. Physical then can be in-store and out-of-store, so whether it's within the perimeter of a retailer, or if it's a parking lot or outside the store. And the online and mobile, that's the big part of the thing. That's typically split between on-site, which is the own website of a retailer, and off-site, which is other third-party websites where you can place ads. And the important thing is on how this business model works. So whether the advertising is more transactional, so very close to the buying decision, or if it's typically more performance marketing driven. So from an advertiser perspective, that makes a big difference which channel and which part of the retail media network you want to use. So typically, the on-site and in-store parts are very transactional, whereas the off-site is more performance-driven. That's classical performance marketing that you do online. And the out-of-store is the typical part that's audience-driven. That's digital out-of-home, pretty much. And in the end, it's all very much data-driven. So they all have in common that it's very, very much data-driven. Advertisers want proof that their ads work in retail media networks.
So this is the chart everyone was looking for. You want to have a number. We don't have a number. Nobody has a number. It's 95, 98%, whatever you say. Dave yesterday mentioned a study where it says it's only 0.5% currently of the whole retail media cake which is in store, but it's growing really fast.
So that's the big downer. I mean, after we said this market is 100 billion plus, it's only a fraction of that. That's really interesting for you, but also, a tiny fraction of 100 billion is still a big number.
would be nice. Would be nice. Stefan, what kind of touch points do we have in a typical retail media setup?
Yeah, and if you ask yourself what role can you play as a digital signage market player in this whole game, and you won't start selling advertising, and the retailers won't get you anywhere near their data pools and the analytics that's being done there. But there's still business to be made. I mean, it's all the play-out infrastructure. It's screens, it's players, it's networks, it's all of those. It's obviously also sensors for collecting data. They need that. They're desperate for that, because it's part of their business model. And obviously, it's also the software that handles that. So there is a business to be made for digital signage companies, and then obviously also installation and operations of these networks, because it's screen networks in the end.
Stefan.
So as we said several times, it's really a data game. So think about what you can do in terms of providing more data. And there you pretty much know the different ways to collect and capture data. So it's visual sensors, it's sensors attached to shopping carts, baskets, it's movement data, beacons, Bluetooth, what have you. So many different data sources. But the ultimate goal for the retailers is two things. Is basically they want to create something like a digital twin of their store, because they need to know where the goods are in the store, shelf placements and all of these things. So where's the product? And then the other part is where's the shopper? What's the shopper doing? What's the shopper interest? So it's the digital twin and the transparent shopper in the end. That's what they are aiming for.
Good. And there's some principles. There are some really smart guys who are in the retail industry, and they looked at some typical principles for retail media. And there's one which, probably the only one which you really need to remember is, one thing is local is personal. So just localizing your advertisement is already, 80% of the job. So you don't have to start, sensors is great to have if you know it's male, female, everything, but the main job, start with localizing it. Good morning, Hamburg, good morning, Munich, whatever, Toulouse, doing things around it. That's more than enough. That gives already a very personal feeling to it.
Yeah, and it's things like local weather, local events, all of these things can be used to make that, to create that relevance, and that's all, that can all be done without expensive sensors.
Exactly. Good, Stefan. This was everything in the store. Now we have a few minutes left where we're leaving the store, and we want to address EV charging. EV charging, it's a difficult business case, and many believe digital out-of-home can save the business case. And the answer is, no, it can't.
But
so,
can you go back?
Yeah, sure.
It is a nice example because this is LA, and this is a nice example of a big DooH screen in combination with the EV charging.
Yeah, and also with the cool stuff, with Tesla and the cool, the cool robots, which deliver your stuff, your orders, your online stuff to your home. Yeah, it's a nice example. But the digital out-of-home business case is very challenging. So the charge operators, these are the guys, who operate all the EV chargers, they're unable to back their cost of installations and operations. Just to give you a ballpark figure, having like a DC, a fast charger, costs you roughly about 300,000 euros. Can you imagine you getting this money back through little selling electricity or advertisement? It's difficult. So it's it's a very challenging game for them. Also, yes, you can get some of the money back in a downtown city location. It's very difficult somewhere outside when you look at the countryside. So. But we have some retailers who believe, it's relevant for them to supporting these charging infrastructure because they want to get customers to their stores. So Starbucks does it, Tesco does it. So they're really, supporting the charging operators in supplying them cheap land, or even paying part of the installation. Really, to bring that also, to bring these drivers and these people to their stores. So there seems to be one, especially in North America. You have some of the native resorts, where you have casinos and everything, so you can charge your car and also leave some money there for gambling. A typical example, and Volta, you all know, was one of the first ones, and they failed miserably. They started 10, 15 years ago, with putting up chargers. It was quite early. There was almost no electric cars. But they placed them right in front of the supermarket, which is great. But unfortunately, their story at that time was, we want to, target all the EV guys, while they're sitting in their car and waiting for half an hour until the car's charged. Well, tough luck, the Teslas, all look in the other direction, because they have on the back. So nobody of the people, sitting in their car, they were all watching, videos on their big screen, but nobody is watching the advertisement. So it was a pure disaster. Yes, people coming in the store, that's fine, but they failed miserably. They went bankrupt. Shell now acquired them, and they changed their strategy. They also gave away electricity for free, which in the US was maybe, at least on paper, a business model. In Europe, definitely it's not, because electricity is much, much more expensive. But this was the first generation. Fair enough, you need some people who would try to do that, but I think there's general understanding that you cannot, give electricity away for free. And yes, if everyone is looking in the other direction, it's not helpful. But there's one other story, because we see so many, of the big charging operators, really, they get flooded with PPP capital. It's unbelievable, and it's great stories we see in Europe, we see around the world. Not every one of them is really successful, but they get a lot of money. They have to invest a lot of money. And how do they make the money? Well, they make the money with buying and selling electricity. That's their main thing, because they're integrating often big batteries there, and they buy when electricity is cheap, and they sell it back to the grid, to the electricity operators, when there's a big demand, and that's how they make their money, at least most of it. Then obviously they have some income through charging to selling electricity, but that's not as big as many people were hoping for, at least currently. And then there's also some digital out-of-home. But let's face it, if you put screens in digital out-of-home chargers, it's not about the EV driver, it's not about the guy charging the car. It's taking the opportunity that you can place the screen at places where you otherwise couldn't. Okay. So when you see the chargers in supermarkets, on parking lots or so, it's usually facing the entrance of the supermarket, or most of them even facing the street. Because that's where the traffic is, that's where you can really sell a story, and that's where it really makes sense.
It basically needs to be a traditional digital out-of-home business case. So if you wouldn't put a regular digital out-of-home screen there, you shouldn't put a screen in the EV charger.
Exactly. And this is an example from Australia, from Yolt. You see them, they place the screen exactly there, It's nothing to do. And to be honest, most of the photos you see nowadays, even of the website from charge operators, the people are looking at their phone while they're charging. So it really shows that the target group for digital out-of-home is the area around it. It's a population there, it's a frequency around it, and that's what really makes it interesting. And we also... But the market or the business models are still changing a lot. And we invited, some of the bigger European guys here to the stage. And at the end, the last week, they all said no, they don't want to speak about it, because the business model of digital out-of-home is still very sketchy, and they're all struggling. They're all collecting a lot of money. That's very, very successful, but it's challenging for them. So we invited 10 of them, and all of them said at the end of the day, no, we are not. We don't want to talk with our competition on stage. We have such a great story, but so it's a good sign how immature or how developing this market is, and that they still say, let's wait another year, maybe then we know better, what we can talk about. Yeah. But there's obvious thing, governments needs to subsidize it. We need many more of these chargers, and then also a business model will develop.
Yeah, and it's going to be a multi-stream business model. So it's not just going to live off one of those streams. It's not just going to live off digital out-of-home advertising. It's not just going to live off selling the electricity, not only by basically arbitraging the electricity costs, or selling battery to the grid. So it's going to be all of them, and some of it still is going to be also subsidies.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this was our overview, and we know retail media, and you will read every day fantastic news about the huge potential. But always have in mind, what's online, what's in store, and have in mind who is calling the shots. It's the retailers, it's less the digital out-of-home companies. For the digital signage industry, it's still fantastic news because they all need professional screens, hopefully professional screens,
and lots of them. In a typical supermarket, you saw the Tesco numbers. They're rolling out 6,000 screens.
Overwhelming, yeah. Lots of professional screens. The challenge, obviously, is to connect them in a store. That's very, very challenging. So we see more and more wireless there coming because it's just too expensive to wire everything because often they're integrated on the shelves. Wireless and digital out-of-home, digital signage, woo, this is a no-go. But I think things are changing. Wireless becoming more stable. And also one of the things we should have mentioned yesterday, I'm not sure if we really mentioned it when we sat here with Dave, it's also the way to wireless. I mean, it's absolutely taboo in our industry, but we see more and more, especially of the newcomers, really say, it's good enough. We're not 100%, that for business critical it's good enough. We wouldn't support that yet. But there are other cases where wireless seems to be an option in certain cases, and retail media is definitely one of them.
We'll see.
We'll see. So it's a really fascinating market. So please speak with your clients. Speak if you have clients in this area, and also look at areas maybe outside of the typical supermarkets. Drugstores and DIY, because in certain markets there are also other places like convenience stores, in some markets where you have high frequency and footfall, in train station and otherwise, but often there's already, different contracts already in place. But there's a lot of potential, and now Stefan and I and Frank, we told you a little bit about the market as an expert, but now we would like to invite a person who's doing this already for more than 20 years. So we're just changing the setup for a moment, and then in 3 minutes we are back with ID Click, which is a subsidiary of Strata Cash, and PRN, which is also part of them. They are one of the first ones. They started Walmart, selling Walmart screens many moons ago. They just announced that they now launched a big European division, and so we will see much more activity coming also from North America here. And maybe one thing before we finish off, because when we talk about retail media, Europe is much more sophisticated than North America. We talked about it yesterday with digital signage, but especially with retail media, supermarkets are very different. There's a different investment here. So currently, there's still an advantage in Europe. So if you do stuff here, try to bring it also to across the Atlantic. Thank you.
Thank you.